for those of us that have been adding telephone numbers to sales orders and invoice for years as a UDF field or as adding a map field from the customer master, Sage has finally added telephone number and extension to sales orders, invoices, and they'll pre-populate if it's filled out in the customer master. But this, again, not sure why we've had fax number for the last 10 years and not telephone, but we're finally here. And then if you were to invoice that, you'll see that it carries over. And that's also now part of the form, so that if you needed to print on packing lists, sales order forms, the invoice form, push to Starship, it's now available. So I'm going to cancel that. All right. The other major change, in my opinion, that they've made is now the ability to have audit tracking in sales order entry. They've also done it in purchase order, and I'll show you that when we get to that point. But in sales order options on the history tab, we open that up. You can see now we have sales order audit. We have our option to track it. It's really all or nothing. And then there's the option to track in detail. My recommendation is to always track in detail because you can always filter reports if they get too long. But if you do only summary, you won't, obviously you can't drill into the detail if you've only done summary. So my recommendation is just track it in detail. If your reports get too long, we can always filter reports. There's all that's pretty much built in. And I'll show you what that looks like. There's two ways you can see that. So if we go to sales order entry, I'll grab that last order we were on. Now in the upper right, next to where the user code appears, there's an audit viewer gear icon. And if you click on that, you can see in summary, this is the summary view of what's been done to this particular sales order. However, if you use the drill down icon to the right, you can actually see all the detail. Now, this is when the order was created. So you see every field was added. So that's all the information that was created by that sales order. So that obviously is a lot. But then we came in and someone, me, made a change. And if I drill into the change, you'll see it just tells what happened for that particular change. So here in this case, I changed to ship via from UPS red to UPS blue. So now for those questions where, we need to know who changed this field, what happened here, you're going to have a record visibility in the sales order, if it still exists, or in a report. So now under sales order, under the reports, there's the sales order audit report. And there's a number of options that we can choose here, how we want to run it, what we want to see. The demo data doesn't have a ton of data, so we'll just do everything. And basically, this is everything that's happened to sales orders. 5 pages in detail. So there really should be no reason that you can't find what was changed by whom and when at any given point. And again, that just needs to be turned on in SO options. That will be off by default. So if you do go into 2025, we just need to turn that on for you. Now, purchase order.
I have a couple questions, Greg.
Sure.
Or one, actually. Is there the same tracking on the field level for vendor?
Yes. In vendor maintenance, vendor tracking already exists. Again, it needs to be turned on in accounts payable options. So there is an option on same on the history tab in accounts payable. And this is an existing in, I forget how far back in Sage this goes, but I know at least for the last 5 or more years that's been available. Now that you won't have the gear lookup there, that hasn't been added, but you have the audit report. Is that helpful?
Looks like it.
Perfect. And again, let's hop over to the history tab. And now again, identical to the sales order, you have purchase order audit. Again, the two options, none or all. So we'll turn on all. And again, I would recommend that you track your additions in detail because at some point you're going to want to know the drill down information. So you want to get as much as possible. So that's going to look very similar. So we open up our purchase order entry. I have my same gear icon, same place. So similar functionality. I can see the summary when I first open it, and then I can drill down into each one of the actions that I want to, see more detail on. So it's very granular. And then they also have added the purchase order audit report. So basically the same functionality as they added in sales order. So purchase order got something at the same time sales order did, which is not always usual when Sage rolls stuff out. So purchase order audit. All right. So, another addition that they did with purchase order that now catches them up to sales order is now if we open up options, a new feature that they added in addition to the audit is the ability to require cancellation codes for purchase orders that are deleted. So if we turn this on, then we open up access to cancel and reason code maintenance under setup in purchase order. And you can come in and define. So there's some predefined Sage codes, and you can go ahead and add, review your own. So you can add your own user defined codes. And if you don't want to use the ones that Sage has, you can just make them inactive and just use your own. So now if you go into purchase order entry, and let's find one that we can cancel here. If I come in and I want to delete this, it's going to ask me, do I want to do this? I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to require that I put in a cancellation code. So I can't get out of this without putting something in. So I'm going to pick my, okay. And now I can go, in the future at some point if I needed to report on, why purchase orders had been canceled. So I was doing something for vendor performance and we've closed a ton of or canceled a ton of POs for a particular vendor. They haven't been sufficiently able to supply our quantity demands or to some effect. You could then run reports on that and then use that for your vendor performance reporting, especially if you're ISO certified. I know that's one of the things that they require. Now, the next thing in purchase order is probably the largest addition to Sage. So this is probably the biggest enhancement that they made. And it's the ability in purchase order now to do RFQs. So a request for quotation, which is something, we've been asking for, well, if you ask Joe, he's been asking for 20 years. So we finally got there. And what they've done is in purchase order entries, given you the option to select a quote, very similar to what you do when you do a sales order quote. So we can come in, we take our next order number. Under order type, you see we have our usual options. And now at the bottom, you see they've added quote. So I'm going to choose my quote. And I'm going to go, oh, my ship expire date. I do want to stop here because I want to show you something that I want in options, just because this has an effect on. So in the entry tab under purchase order options, they've added a section for quotes. So there's a couple of features that you can set up so that your quotes behave and how you'd like them. One is being use the default order date when generating purchase order. And the default order date is basically today's date. It's actually coming from the defaults field. And I'll show you that when we go back into the order. But this is just saying use today's date when I'm generating a purchase order from this quote. So when I make it active and basically, release it, it will use the order date of today and use the order date from today. Or if I have this checkbox cleared, it's going to use the date of the original RFQ. So when the quote was created. So that's really what that means. So I'm going to want it to default to the day that I'm actually generating it. I do have a default number of days that I can set so that the quote will expire and it automatically populates the date. And I can choose what I want to use for cost. Now I'm going to apologize. I'm going to cancel this because I want to show you those options. Now I have it set to zero cost because my expectation is I want the vendor to fill in the cost and I don't want to give them any, information other than the zero so that they fill it in and not use what I've used but that doesn't have to be the case. You can pick which cost to use if you would like to send that to the vendor. So you can use last cost, average cost, standard cost, zero unit cost, have it prompt. The cost hierarchies is going to be based on your LIFO, FIFO, and your first in, first out. So whatever the last cost or the first cost. Again, I feel like zero cost makes the most sense, but you're not limited to that. So back to purchase order. Take my next number. And again, I'll change this to quote. I'm going to pick my vendor. Now, this is the first vendor that I pick is the vendor that's going to pre-populate all the information on the purchase order header. However, I'm not limited to the one vendor. I'm able to create this quote to go out to multiple vendors. And I do that by hitting the plus icon just to right of the vendor lookup. And it opens up another box that says, hey, tell me all the other vendors you'd like this quote to go to. So I'm going to pick a couple others here. Right. And I'm going to say okay. And now I'm going to grab the lines. Let me pick an item. Two of these. And you can see because I have the zero cost set, it doesn't bring a cost in. And it says here, quote item, zero unit cost. So, but it does tell me in the lower left dialog what my actual last cost, average cost, and standard costs are. So I do have visibility in my costs here. All right, I'll flip over to totals. We're not really adding anything here. And then I'm going to hit accept. Right. Now there's a couple ways I can print this. So I can quick print it, or I can print it as a range. Now, the printer icon that we would normally use for our range of purchase order printing, doesn't print quotes. But if you notice, just to the right of that icon, there's a drop-down arrow. If I click that, you'll see I have an option to do purchase order printing or quote printing. So if I pull up quote printing, and I preview this, you see I get all 3 vendors that we're requesting the quote from. You can see that on the form, there is not an area for the vendor to fill in. Now, this quote, request for quote, can also be emailed using your standard email functionality that you have in Paperless Office. I don't have that turned on in this demo company, but if you set it up, it will be there and available for you. And this allows me to print a range of POs, or we can do a quick print. And basically, the quick print knows whether it's a quote or not. So you don't have to choose with the quick print. You can just simply quick print this. And I get all 3 RFQs to go out. Now I'm going to go back to the first one because I just wanted to show you. If you notice, the item code here is not the same item code as the others. And that is because for this vendor, Airway, we have a vendor alias set up. So out of the box, the RFQ will print vendor aliases if they are created in your system. So it just makes it easy, comes out automatically. Obviously, sometimes you want to see both. So you can certainly turn on your item code to print here as well. And that's pretty easy to do. And as most of you know, every form, every report in Sage 100 can be modified using Crystal reports. All right. Now, so quotes come back and you decide on, well, I don't want to use Airway this time. Maybe their lead time's too long, maybe, whatever happens to be. I want to use one of the other vendors. Now, I'll do All Climate. So one of the things I do have to do is change the vendor number in the quote to the vendor that I'm actually going to be releasing the PO for, change that. And then once that is done, I can check the box that my quote is ready to generate. I'll go in and fill in the unit cost that the vendor gave me. Okay. And then I can generate the order. So this is a one-off. I can choose to include the comment lines or the memos. It's going to tell me what the next purchase order number is. Say okay. And now I'm going to come in and you can see 143, excuse me, is now a standard purchase order. There's our item, there's our quantity. Oh, and I didn't accept the unit cost because I didn't tab off that field. And again, too, once the quote is turned into an order, the order is fully editable. So you can see I can still change it. I can add to it if I want to add other items to this.
Quick question, Greg. Is there any tracking of responses?
Not internally. As I was going through this and and that was something that I had thought about, is the way I thought that we could handle this is to attach the the vendor's responses as memos. So if the vendor returns a physical PDF copy, something that we can actually save, then we can attach it to the purchase order as an attachment. Let me go to that last one. So that we'd have a copy of all three of, and I do want to see that the quote does stay out there, but it goes into completed status so that you don't actually lose the quote like you do in sales order, where in the sales order you turn a quote into an order. It that same quote becomes the sales order. In this case, we keep the original quote. We have it show as completed, which means when you do your normal utilities of purging, it will purge out based on whatever the date range you have um, in your setup to keep, how long to keep open purchase orders. So I'm going to say yes, but my thought was because it is to use the memo codes and attachments, so I could. It this is just my thought, and then I could attach the return PDF from All Climate, the one from Anders, the one from all the vendors. So I'd have physical copies there that I could go into at any time because these will carry over into history. But I think that's, as far as, I've been able to get with this, that seems to be the workaround for that, if that makes sense.
Think we're following.
Okay. Now there is one other way to generate your standard orders from your purchase order quotes, your RFQs. And let me grab, I think this one's still open. Yep. All right, so here's one. So if I have more than one quote that I'm working that I want to generate into an order, I can do that. There's an auto generate feature, so I could just come in and check the box of the quotes I'm turning into orders and then use the utility to just generate multiples. So this utility, let's go ahead and I want to say, I'll just do and this should just generate the one that we were, or unless I have another one checked. Yeah, just the one. So just a couple of ways you can do it. You can do it as a one-off using the generate on the actual physical quote, or use the auto generate if you want to do multiples. Might just save a little time. And this again, it's just going to tell me what it's creating. And that's probably the biggest feature that Sage has added into this release. So it's and I do, it is something that we have been waiting for a long time. So hopefully, there's some benefit to you guys in terms of additional functionality. One of the other features, though, they did add to purchase order I want to touch on before we leave PO is in return of goods. Excuse me, my order number here. So in return of goods, when I'm in the current Sage, if I do a return of goods, reference a PO, Sage is going to reopen the purchase order, back order the quantities that I'm returning onto that purchase order and put it in back order status. So basically, it puts it back out there, and the assumption is I'm going to receive it in at some point. So I'm returning it for repair. But we all know that that's not the case. A lot of times we return product because it's defective, we didn't want it, it's the wrong thing, whatever it happens to be. And we don't want to reopen the PO. We just want to return it to the vendor for credit. So what Sage added here and is over here on the right, there's a backorder PO option, which is defaulted, but I can turn it off and I can set this so that it doesn't default. But if I turn this off, then I am going to return the goods. So I'm going to take the product out of inventory for whatever the quantity is I'm returning and not create an open PO or repopulate the PO with a backorder quantity. So if I do this and got to distribute that. So I'm going to return these two. And update this. All right, so it's just going to tell me I'm taking two out of stock. I've returned to my cost, my lot number. There was no taxes on this. And now I should see the dollars come out of inventory. So I have my credit to inventory and I debited purchases clearing because I had not yet received this invoice, this particular purchase order. So now, if everything magically works here, we're going to go in and look at that PO 10028. And you can see that it didn't open it back up. It's still in receive status and doesn't go back into back order status. So it just gives you some flexibility there. So if you do have items that you are returning that you were actually expecting them to replace, then you can reopen the PO so you can re-receive it in. Or if you're returning product and you're expecting credit, you can go ahead and uncheck that box and have it just return the goods and not reopen the PO.
Here's Greg's information, should you want to reach out to him directly. Thank you for your time. We know your time is valuable, so we really appreciate you spending a little bit of it with us.